If you want to, we can just do a year-end like book review episode.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
All right, guys, next show, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, we'll do a year.
We're going to do a year wrap, and we'll cover more books that we have read from before the podcast went live.
And if you want to post your reviews, and I'll go back and put this at the beginning of the episode too, so people actually hear it. If you want to post your reviews in the comments on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, we'll read them on the air, and we'll have like a big mailbag episode.
You know what we'll do too? Follow our Instagram. We'll put up a few polls of like your favorite books of the year.
Yeah, I'll turn on the Instagram.
What's on Instagram?
Yeah, so Instagram, it's TBR_CT, as that's our handle on Instagram. And
and start following us. And before the end of the year, we'll launch some polls on what books have been popular in terms of sales. And you guys can all vote on them, and we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're books that I've read.
Hi there, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Book Revolution podcast.
I'm Amanda.
You came in too early.
No, you came in too late.
No, you came in too early.
No.
This is a podcast about books. You gotta let me get that in.
No. If they're here, they know it's about books. It's got book in the name.
And I'm Tim.
That's great.
I can see how the show's gonna go. So Amanda, remind everyone where they can find us.
Because Tim can't remember. It's okay, guys. We like him anyways. So you can find us on YouTube at the Bin Network. You can follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Audible, all under the Book Revolution podcast. And as you're listening, make sure you comment with any topic suggestions for future shows and book recommendations for us to read also.
Oh yes, we have those. We have a few of those to go over. Coming soon, I promise, is the Kickstarter for the Book Revolution bookstore. It's probably going to launch in January of the new year at this point. But look out for that in the new year, and we'll put that up when it's available.
Also follow us on Instagram. What's our Instagram?
Oh yeah, we created an Instagram. Hold on. So our Instagram page is TBR_CT. Follow us on Instagram, and you'll get all the latest information about the bookstore and the podcast. And we'll post cool pictures of the books we're reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that all of that is out of the way.
Yep.
We'll start with what are you
currently
reading?
I literally just finished a book before we started this podcast, so the next book on my list that has the bookmark in there, but technically I haven't begun reading it yet, is Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. I'm not entirely sure how to say her name. But book 1 of the Four Horsemen series. I'm looking for a good romantasy read, a nice quick romantasy read, so I'm looking forward to that one. I technically read the first chapter at Barnes & Noble before I bought it.
All right.
Actually, cut that and go, I technically read the first chapter at the bookstore before I bought it.
I see.
So, I know a little bit about the story, but I'm looking forward to getting into that.
Okay.
What are you currently reading?
So, I finally finished 5 Broken Blades.
That's not possible.
Yeah. So, I'm not reading it anymore.
So, what are you reading?
I'm currently reading Bleach Volume 4, which is a combination of 3 different Bleach books. This is more of just the cleanse my palate of whatever I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
Something fun and quick for me to read because it's manga, so it's very quick. I'm already 100 pages in.
In how long?
I started reading it the other day.
Is it called reading?
Yeah, I mean it's still reading. You're still reading.
I thought it was just pictures.
It's pictures and it's a comic book. You read comic books.
Do you?
Yeah.
Or do you look at them?
You look and read. That's the point. There's dialogue that you read.
I'm going to get hate for that.
You are. You're going to get so much hate for that.
That's fine. That's fine.
But actually when I go back to reading books, I'm going to finish reading the Becky Lynch autobiography, because
The Man.
I was more than halfway through that when I stopped reading it, so I could just finish it.
How are you doing on your let's complete the what books I found I was in the middle of list?
So I was at 17. I'm down to 15.
That's not a real remarkable change.
No, it's not.
You gotta get on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Becky Lynch is part of that, so.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, you got 2.5 weeks before the end of the year.
I'm not going to read 17 books before the end of the year.
Why not?
That's a lot of reading. And most of those books I only barely started.
Well, then why do they count?
Because they're still on there.
Do you remember, like, where... It doesn't matter.
I do. There's bookmarks in them.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you remember what happened until you got to that bookmark point.
I might have. I don't know.
Like, I've got, I don't know, 6 or 7 books upstairs on my bookshelf that have bookmarks somewhere in the middle of them. But I'm not going to pick up where that bookmark is. If I go back to reading them, I'm going to start from the beginning again.
Well, if I start it and I'm like, oh, I don't remember any of this, then I'll just restart it or put it back on the shelf and take the bookmark out.
All right.
All right. So in honor of me finishing Five Broken Blades, we're going to talk about the book genre that is known as Romantasy.
It's the best.
Because I accidentally read that book and discovered that it was one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to know why.
Why what?
Why is Romantasy so popular?
I don't know that I can answer that.
Well, why do you
That's
like
a loaded
it so
question.
much? Well, why do you like it so much?
I like it because it's completely unique. It's typically a whole different world. It doesn't normally take place on Earth, right? It's a whole different place.
Yeah.
And it gives a sense of escapism. It lets you completely forget what's going on in the world around you. It lets you completely forget your troubles, and you kind of live in this world where people have magical powers, which means they can do things that you can't do. Plus, it's softcore porn, sometimes hardcore porn. Who doesn't like that?
Well, up until you said it's softcore porn, you're describing like every fantasy novel ever.
Yeah, but add softcore porn.
Yeah, but like, so why is that the thing now? Like, why is that?
Because there are a lot of middle-aged women who liked fantasy books when they were kids and now are also horny.
So before we started the show, we were trying to figure out how many of these books that you have read.
Yeah.
And we were trying to figure out like what qualifies as like a romantasy book, and you said Twilight.
Twilight is technically a romantasy.
So is that like, do you think that's a lot of people's introduction into romantasy?
I think it depends on your background. Sometimes it was a good start into romantasy for like my generation. The generation who grew up with Twilight in high school and early college. I think that Outlander is another good, gateway into romantasy because it's a little bit more of Harlequin romance that, listen, women for decades have been reading smut romance novels. For decades. The only thing that's changed is more fantasy has been brought into it, and it's less, cowboy on the ranch.
So it's like less 50 Shades of Grey kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really the only difference. Like, I mean, I grew up with my mom reading Nora Roberts. Nora Roberts is complete romance, and all romance books, anything in the romance section at a bookstore has sex in it. It has porn in it. It's very soft core normally, and normally it's not as prevalent. It's not like sex every page. There's 1 or 2 really good sex scenes and that's it. And as you determine whether you like that, you go harder and harder. It's kind of like a drug. You know how when you were a kid, your parents were like, "Don't do pot. It's a gateway drug." It's the same thing. You go harder and you go harder.
So don't do 50 Shades of Grey. It's a gateway drug.
50 Shades is not a gateway. Twilight was a gateway. Outlander's a gateway. And even just like the general Harlequin romances are gateways.
So
Nora Roberts is a great gateway. Danielle Steele. She was one that my mom loved. Gateway.
Oh, that's got to be a pen name. That can't be a real name.
Probably not. But if go to like any bookstore or library, or I don't know if actually some libraries probably banned those books. But if you go to any bookstore, Danielle Steele's got a size like Stephen King in the bookstore. Like, she's got 20, 30, 40 books on the shelves.
All right, so what got you into like the current form? Like, what was the first one of these Romantasy books that you read that you were like, oh, this is like different?
The this year trends.
Yeah.
No, I mean these started a couple years ago. I thought I was gonna get it. Like, so it's A Court of Thorns and Roses was the main one that got most people into it. This cycle around this 2020s cycle, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was Iron Flame.
Okay.
Because I thought I wanted to read Court of Thorns and Roses a couple years ago when it was super big, and I got, I don't know, like a chapter in and it wasn't doing it for me, so I moved on. This year I read Iron Flame, and I don't know, I got through it in like 2 days and loved it so much that I was like, wow, I need the rest of this series. And I went to the bookstore and I went to the person helping and I said, I need every other book in this series. And they pointed to the table where only one more book was. And I said, no, all of them. And they said, oh yeah, that's the only other one that's released. And I said, God damn it.
It's not like me and fucking the Wheel of Time books where it's like, oh yeah, I need all the, well, we only carry like 4 of the 20 books in Wheel of Time. Yeah.
Right. No, this was only 2 had been released. Actually, the third one still has not been released. It comes out next month. But that's what got me into it. And so once I got through those 2 books, which took all of, I think, a sum total of 4 days, then I needed more. Then the itch had been scratched and I needed it. But that one was very much, it's all books that have some aspect of something that you kind of desire in some way, shape, or form. So Iron Flame and Fourth Wing, it was dragons. Who doesn't want a dragon? Wouldn't that be so frackin' cool to have a dragon who you could communicate with telepathically and you flew on? Who doesn't want that? This Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is probably considered a romantasy.
You think Game of Thrones is romantasy? But there's a lot of like incest.
That's romance to them. The argument could be made. Not necessarily the whole series, but some of those books could be considered romantasy.
So this goes back to one of our other episodes. We were talking about the difference between the book and the show.
Mm-hmm.
Is Game of Thrones, because I don't know because I didn't read them, is Game of Thrones, the book series, as sexually graphic as Game of Thrones, the HBO show?
Man, I'd go with more so.
So are you saying that HBO toned it down?
Yeah. And I think that whoever does the Court of Thorns and Roses, because that is supposed to be happening, is going to be toned down.
Jeez, I thought that like HBO was just doing it because it's HBO.
No, those things happened in the book.
Jeez. All right. All of it? Well, I mean, as far as you know from the books that are written.
Yeah.
Damn.
Or more happened in the books, and they cut in the show.
Do you think that George R. R. Martin is still going to have Jon Snow fuck his cousin?
I don't think I'm ever getting the book, so it's not going to matter. In fact, across my newsfeed recently, George R. R. Martin said he doesn't know he's actually going to finish them. Like, he himself has now admitted he might not finish them, so I don't think it's ever happening. Anyways, back to Romantasy.
So I have read one of these books now.
Yes, were there dragons?
No.
Okay.
It was.
Were there fairies?
No.
What was the fantasy then?
The fantasy was, I think there's magic.
Okay.
Yes, there's definitely magic, and it's like about assassins.
Well, assassins aren't fantasy.
No, but like the kind of world, like you're talking about how it's like in a different world.
Yeah.
So it's like not Earth.
Yeah.
And the kind of world they live in is very Asian culture centric.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there is an amount of magic in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not devoid of magic. Okay. And there's creatures.
Okay.
But there's no dragons.
Okay. So were you drawn in? Do you like the genre now enough to read more of it? Did it scratch an itch for you?
I don't know.
Or did you try the pot and say, this isn't for me?
So when we get to the end of the episode, I'll do the actual review of the book, but I don't mind the softcore porn. Mm-hmm. Like it's I feel pretty neutral about it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that it's not for me, but it's not. I also don't like, oh, this adds to the book.
Mm-hmm.
I did like the plot of the book.
Okay.
I did like the story universe was pretty cool. And I like the characters, but I don't know if I feel that like the porn part of the book or like the sex scene part of the book was necessary for some of the characters.
Oh, it's never necessary.
That as a writer,
Yeah.
I don't know if it added to the appeal of the book.
See, all right. Well, so I'm going to be reading this book,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you whether it added what it needed to add. I have not picked it up yet. I have to read my next series first, and then I'll go over to Five Broken Blades. But the appeal to these books, the romance piece of it, because a fantasy book is a fantasy book, right? And that's going to appeal to the crowd the way it's going to appeal. Like the dragon piece, the magic piece is all, yes, things that appeal to a very particular person. The romance piece of it appeals, and I think more heavily to women than men, typically, because in the groups that I'm in, there are men, but there's very few men who participate in those types of books. It's just more common for women. I don't know if that's because men feel judged for it, and maybe men read it but don't talk about it, and so they don't join those groups, or if men just aren't interested in it. I'm not sure. But I know a lot of women are interested and very vocal and open. We don't care who knows what we're reading anymore.
Right.
50 Shades was, I think, the first one that made that break into society. Like 50 Shades, it was like, I remember being in the office and people were talking about reading 50 Shades, but it was like in very hushed tones. It was in the corner of the office. You didn't talk about it openly because you knew what it was, and it was just a little bit different, right? Now nobody cares. Now it's all open everywhere. They're like, yeah, obviously I read this, and I might use some toys after I read it. I don't know.
Well, and those books got so popular that didn't the author write the books from the other perspective, the other main character's perspective?
The man's perspective. Yes, she wrote. I don't know if she wrote all three actually. I have two of them, and I never. I don't think I actually finished through them, but I don't know if she came out with a third. I would assume she did. Maybe they weren't that popular. Anyways, the romance piece, I think, at least for me, appeals to my sense of wanting. It's like going back to that puppy dog love, like your first love in high school.
Uh-huh.
And you're so infatuated with that person that you can't fathom breathing without them around you. It brings that emotion back, which is just not an emotion that exists in most life. Because you grow out of that. Your hormones are no longer that raging, and you grow into a more steady relationship with whoever you're with.
Right.
And I think that the romantasy exacerbates that and leaves it where it's always in that, like, very heightened, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very, magnetic sort of a relationship.
Okay.
And that's what the porn pieces add to it.
Okay.
It, like, helps build onto that relationship building. And so the romantasy, having both features into it, kind of just, it brings a very strong romantic relationship that is harder to build on when you don't have the magic of things, right? So Court of Thorns and Roses, it's, they teleport to each other. Like, I can't be without you, I'm teleporting to you. Even just as small as these cute little things, like they have notes that they write back and forth, but the notes are magic. And so you write on this little piece of paper next to your bed with a pen, and it disappears when you're done writing on it, and it goes to that other person's pocket, basically.
Right.
And just that little thing is like, oh, that's so cute. It's like a text where they don't have cell phones. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a cute little note. And I don't know. It's a romance book that has magic and dragons and fairies and what's not to love?
So, the tropes that I kind of got from Five Broken Blades is like the opposites attract kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, what was a big one? There were two characters that like.
The most popular are like enemies to lovers.
Yes, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah, that's like in all of them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that was definitely in that book.
Yeah, enemies to lovers is a big trope for it. The other one is forced proximity, forced close proximity.
Yes.
Yeah. These are all tropes that are in all the Romantasy books.
Is there one that's like former lovers and then they hate each other and then they love each other again, sort of thing?
Probably, but I don't know that one as often.
Yeah, the close proximity one, that definitely happened.
It's forced close proximity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to like go into the story, but yeah.
No, but I mean the tropes are what the tropes are. Like
Yeah.
those are open and not
And
really
the,
like a spoiler.
and the enemies to lovers thing definitely happened.
Yeah, shadow daddies, enemies to lover, forced close proximity.
What's a shadow daddy?
Oh my god, the shadow daddy books are the best.
You're gonna have to explain that one because I don't know what the fuck that means.
The shadow daddy is a guy who has magical powers that create shadows in some way, shape, or form. Like he's just a dark guy. Like you know how the old-fashioned stereotype is tall, dark, and handsome.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of that. It's the dark part of the tall, dark, and handsome. So in Fourth Wing Iron Flame, when you bond with your dragon, you get like a power. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think the power happens. It's after you bond with your dragon, you get a power. And so the male lead, his power is power over shadows. He can create shadows wherever he wants.
Oh my god.
He's a shadow daddy. He's a daddy to the shadows.
That happens in Bleach.
Well, he's a shadow daddy. Bleach has shadow daddies. You don't even know. And then in Court of Thorns and Roses, Rhysand is the Lord of Night, so he controls the night.
Okay. All right.
It's shadow daddies.
Oh boy, I didn't need to know all that. All right, so like
I just put like Romantasy into your Bleach.
Jesus.
Fuck.
He doesn't. It's.
Is it implied because it's pictures, so you can't draw it?
Well, no. In the show, it's kind of implied, but he's like a ladies' man kind of character.
Okay.
And like he's very smooth talking,
Mm-hmm.
but like one of his abilities is to be able to use shadows to attack people with.
Yeah, he's a shadow daddy.
All right. Didn't need to know that.
If it wasn't a picture book and it had only words, I'd probably read it.
And he does have like a semi-dark past. Like
they always have dark brooding pasts.
Yeah.
They're always very damaged.
Yeah.
Sometimes damaged because of like they did good, sometimes damaged because not. But either way, they're dark and brooding. And that's why they're shadow daddies.
He's not an anti-hero, but he's definitely done things that were like not in line with the law.
Morally questionable?
Morally questionable.
Yes. We always like a morally gray enemies to lovers shadow daddy. That is definitely where it's awesome.
You're thinking about it, he is a bit more sexualized than the other male characters.
I just made Bleach a Romantasy on you. You're welcome.
I would say that most manga, whether they're action related or not, are probably qualify as Romantasy.
Mm-hmm.
It's only like the ones where they're like strictly no sexualization of characters. Like Dragon Ball's not a Romantasy because nobody cares about that in Dragon Ball. But
right.
Bleach is definitely, the characters do have relationships.
All right.
So, all right, now I know what a shadow daddy is, I guess. Are there any other terms that I should be aware of?
Probably. But those are the ones that I like. I
now I have to.
am attracted to. So, like, those are the ones I read.
Yeah, but it also does books.
Oh.
So now thinking about this, I have brought up the A Court of Thorns and Roses trope page on TV Tropes.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what we got here. There's blanked out spoilers, so I won't be able to spoil anything.
Good.
Okay, so one of the tropes is hotter and sexier. It says the series has never shied away from depicting sexual content, but A Court of Silver Flames, the first book to be specifically marketed as adult literature rather than young adult. So which number is A Court of Silver Flames?
I think that is number 4 or 5.
Okay. It says that the sex scenes are far more frequent and explicit than previous installments to the point of bordering on porn with plot. It's number 4.
It is number 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So number 4 is like your good and bad guy is kind of resolved for the most part.
Okay.
The hero couples are fully together. And yeah, they're married. There's a whole lot of doing it. They
Uh,
do it in the sky as they're flying. Like, not in an airplane. They hit the Mile High Club just using their wings.
all right.
It's great.
It also says that there is what was it, interspecies romance all over the place between humans and
Well,
various
yes.
fae.
Yeah. Duh.
Trying to see if there's
Listen,
any more.
it's totally okay for, like, a 20-year-old to get with a 600-year-old because it's a fairy. But a 20-year-old with, like, a 50-year-old, that's wrong. That's a trope, too.
All right, so these books can, like, Five Broken Blades wasn't very explicit in its
Right, but we
content.
talked about that. That it's a multi-book series.
Yeah.
That's not a standalone.
Yeah.
And in my experience, book 1 of a series is never that spicy. Book 1 of the series is, like, the least spice of them all.
Okay.
And it builds. Because they have so much more space to give for their storyline, they spend the first book really developing your emotions for these characters, so you really, like, care
Okay.
when they turn spicy. And that's how Court of Thorns and Roses went. The very first book had very little to no spice. Book 2 was like, bam! Here we are. This is romance, not just fantasy. And it just got sexier and sexier. So in Court of Thorns and Roses, book 4, the Silver Flames one, the one that's billed as an adult novel, is the last of the books for that couple.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay.
For Feyre. And Feyre's story ends with book 4, basically. Not that she's no longer in there, but she's no longer the main character. In book 5, one of her sisters becomes the main character.
Okay.
And so it kind of restarts the sexual tensions because now it's a different main character.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, it would make sense that out of books 1 through 4, which is all of the Feyre arc, that 4 is going to be the spiciest because you're about to leave her.
All right.
So let's get it on. We're going to have to put, like, a art rating on this podcast.
It might be fine. So what is so far, like, your favorite Romantasy book?
It's got to be the Court of Thorns and Roses storyline, simply because I consider the Feyre arc the original, and, like, that arc is the one that I think is the best so far. I didn't really care for book 5. I know there's a whole bunch of people. This is going to be a really, like,
Uh-oh.
hot take. There's a big community who loves book 5 because book 5 is...
It's only episode 5. Don't get us canceled.
I know. But book 5 is from Nesta's perspective, and Nesta, you either love her or hate her, and I'm of the mind that I kind of hate her. She's kind of a bitch. And I get kind of the underlying theory behind it, but I feel like people who love Nesta so much are kind of forgetting the fact that, you know, she refused to help keep her family alive
Okay.
at the beginning and let her littlest sister of the 3, she's the oldest. She's supposed to take care of her family. That's her job as the oldest. Sorry. That's her job as the oldest. So she can be a petulant child and whine and bitch all she wants, but she should have stepped up and done something to help her family instead of just being a prima donna bitch.
So if you're listening and you want to respond, send your hate mail to the bookrevolutionstore@gmail.com.
You get so much hate mail. That's fine. I don't care. I know people don't like Feyre because they think that she's, I don't know, whiny or something, but I liked her. She worked hard for what she got.
All right.
However, what I will say, back to your what's my favorite storyline, I reserve the right to change that to the Iron Flame storyline when that's completed. But it's not completed yet, so I can't promise you that I'm going to love it.
Okay. Now, what's something about Romantasies that you absolutely don't like? Is there something about the genre that is either overdone or is not to your liking? Maybe, you know, repetitive storylines or just, like, poorly written characters.
So, I mean, my biggest gripe are the ones that, like, I think take themselves too seriously. Let's be honest. It's not meant to be serious reading.
Okay.
It's not meant to be... It's not meant to have literary content or real moral purpose or themes that are supposed to teach you something. It's fun books. It's books for fun. So I feel like there's a couple that I've read that just moved really slow in my perspective, or like felt like they were trying to make bigger points, and I just thought it was a waste of my time. Like, I don't know, I liked the books where every page you read there's something material happening.
Okay.
And I get that that's hard. That's a lot to write from a writer's perspective, for sure. But like, I read Quicksilver this year, and there's a bunch of people who really love that book, and I just felt like it was a fine book. It was okay, but it was one of those books where it wasn't until the last like 50 pages of the book that I actually was like, okay, now I kind of like it a little bit. Then I got through, I don't know how long it is. It's probably a 350, 400 page book or something.
Yeah.
It means I got through 300 pages, was kind of bored. Like, I shouldn't be bored reading a romantasy book. Let me be bored reading a historical fiction. Like, let me be bored reading a pure fiction book that's not, like, that is trying to, like, make some literary, win a Pulitzer, right? Let me be bored with a book that's trying to win a Pulitzer, and it's got really good storytelling, and it's written really well, but the plot is also kind of boring. It's like the Oscar movies.
Right.
You know, like, it's probably a really good movie, but it's also kind of boring from a plot perspective. And that's how I feel sometimes the authors are trying to take it a little too seriously. It doesn't need to be serious, guys. We're talking about fairies and magic and dragons and ogres. And it's just, it doesn't need to be that serious. Write what it is. It's smut, and it's fun, and let me escape out of that world, out of the world I'm in, out of the world of numbers as an accountant, and let me just fantasize a little bit in my 400, 500 page book, preferably a series. I hate standalones. And just let me dream a little bit.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about Romantasy? I'm sure it's a topic that we'll be revisiting once that book comes out.
Yeah, I think that, so as far as Romantasy goes, I mean, we're going to talk about it again when I finish Five Broken Blades, so we can
Oh, yes.
both talk about that when I start and finish that. But I think that the genre itself is so vast right now, and there's so much out there, that there is really something for everyone. Like, I'm the one who wants the fast-paced books with lots of spice. And I know I want plot too. I don't want it to be all spice, but I want it to be plot that matters. I want it to be plot with consequences. But there's some people who don't, and so I think what is really useful is you can see all the videos on like Book Talk where someone's like, oh, if you like this book, read this. If you like this, read that. I think that's far more useful than those influencers who are trying to post, oh, here's what's underrated, here's what's overrated, because that opinion is just so different based on what you actually want to get out of your book.
Right.
I've seen some people put that and they're like, oh, well, Iron Flame is so overrated, like, it's not that great. But you know what? I fucking loved Iron Flame. Because if you're not, as long as you're not reading the book because of a hype, then it doesn't really matter whether it's over or underrated. If it's a good book, it's a good book. Meanwhile, while that same person might think that's overrated, they might also be the person who didn't really love Court of Thorns and Roses. They might be the person who didn't really love the Rhapsodic series that I read earlier this year. Like, but those are the books that I like. So I want to see someone who likes those books and what they like in response.
Are there any of the books that didn't live up to the hype for you?
Well, I don't pay attention to what's hyped on Book Talk, so I can't say that I know what's being hyped or not. I know that I read Quicksilver as a part of a book club, and most people really loved that there, and it didn't do it for me. Like I said, it was slow moving. There was one that I think has been hyped. I don't know entirely, but it was another book club book that I read for Romantasy. It was called, I think, When the Fate of the Inked or something like that, or I forget exactly what it was called, but it's about like Viking.
Okay.
Taking place in like Viking settings, and that one I thought was a decent book. Like, it was pretty good. And once again, we have fucking books at our book club that are the first book in a series, and the rest of the series is not out yet. Which is super frustrating. But that was a decent book. I liked that. I left on a cliffhanger which I think is super important for a series to get people to come back to, especially when it's not out yet. Leave me at a good cliffhanger, make me want to read the next page right now. But yeah, I think that there's something for everyone out there. If you've never tried Romantasy, I wouldn't just jump into like A Court of Thorns and Roses right away. I might start a little bit softer. Throne of Glass is far softer. I think it's why it's taking me so long to get through.
Okay.
Like, Throne of Glass is definitely not spicy. At least not the point I'm in, which is,
Yeah.
6 and 7 out of 8. Like, first 5 books, not spicy. There's like one sex scene in the whole thing.
All right. Well, everyone listening, let us know what you think about Romantasy. What books do you like? What books do you not like? And, once again, we always take book recommendations. And if you want to give Amanda a Romantasy book recommendation,
I'm all for it. Check my story graph first, because I might have read it.
Yeah.
But follow me on story graph. I forget if it's TBR Hammer or Hammer TBR, but it's one or the other.
And, well, let's move on to reviews, because I got a book to review.
I would love to hear your review first, because you have not been able to review a book nearly as often as I have.
So, okay.
Tell me how you felt about 5 Broken Blades.
So, up front, 5 Broken Blades, 4.2 out of 5.
All right.
I did not expect it to be a series book, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, it has one of those... The reason it's not a 5... is because the ending is not an ending, and I don't appreciate that a whole lot.
All right.
I understand that it's part of a series, but it didn't have like a cliffhanger ending or anything. It just sort of was like, well, wait for the next book, and the characters are just like off on another adventure, and I was like, that's sort of disappointing. Like, even if you were gonna like leave it at something important, you should leave it at something that like gets people to want to read the next bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be fine to read the next book, but it's not like, oh my god, I have to read it.
Right.
I thought the characters were good. I thought the book is very inclusive.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a normal thing in Romantasy, but there's a bit of LGBT spiciness.
I think most of the Romantasy books I've read this year had LGBTQ presentation.
Okay.
And representation.
I mean,
Court of Thorns and Roses has interracial and various gender options. They don't necessarily all have that, but yeah, I think that they try to be fairly inclusive. At least the modern ones do.
The plot is pretty good. And the pacing is good. Like, it's not a fast-paced book because it's like 500 pages.
No, just because it's 500 pages doesn't mean it's not fast-paced.
Well, okay, the action doesn't happen like bam, 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 bam. Like, it spaces it out a little bit with like character development and stuff like that. So like, I would say it's medium paced. I think that's what I put down on my story graph.
Okay.
It's got some cool, like, the who wrote the book? That'd be a good thing to say. Back to story graph. Can you see who the author is?
I can't even see the book on the shelf.
Yeah, well, because you need your glasses.
Oh, I see it. My Cortland, it looks like.
My Cortland.
I think that's what it says. I'm not wearing my glasses, though. So it definitely says a thing. But it's also not, standing straight up. Which is anarchy.
It's not anarchy.
It's anarchy!
It's fine. Here we go. Yeah, My Cortland is the author of the book, and...
Bam!
I would say that, like, there's no characters that aren't fleshed out. At least as far as, book one would allow. If you're writing a multi-book series, you don't want to know all the character secrets. But... it's fairly fleshed out. The characters are interesting. They have, like I said, the enemies to lovers thing, which I didn't expect in the beginning, which I suppose was good, but I'm not familiar with the tropes of the genre. So, yeah, a good. I would recommend if you like some of the if you like the lighter side
Less
of the
spice.
spiciness.
Yeah.
Five Broken Blades, because it doesn't really go
On a scale of
into
1 to 5 flames, how spicy is it?
2.5.
2.5.
2.5.
That's fairly spicy.
It's got some stuff.
Okay.
It's got some stuff. It's not like to the max.
Okay.
It's obvious that like the writer is saving stuff for
More.
later. Yeah. Because there's a relationship that kind of seems like it's going there, but it does't quite
Okay.
at the end of the book, and
Okay.
you're like, but you promised me as the reader
For closure.
Yeah. So, but since it's apparently a book in a series, that stuff's bound to happen.
Mhm.
So, for me, it suffers from book in a series syndrome, but other than that, it's pretty good.
Okay, I want to know if after your first encounter with a Romantasy book, if you would pick up another. Is it a genre you're interested in?
I would try another one. I don't know if I would go like all the way in to like another. I don't. I would probably try one of the ones that isn't like, just wall to wall spiciness. Like I said, that it's not something that really matters to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do it as long as the story is good.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't do it just for the spiciness.
Mm-hmm. I wonder then if you'd be the person who does like Quicksilver.
Maybe.
You might like that. It's a series. It might be getting spicier later, but in book 1, there's like 0 spice. It's got longing and like sexual tension, but no real release of that tension.
Okay. So yeah, 4.25 out of 5.
All right.
Would recommend.
Okay. Cool. I'm gonna need you to look up when the next book comes out in that series to know when I'm gonna actually plan to read it. I might delay reading it because I've got so many that I'm in the middle of a series for that I'm waiting for the next book. It's very frustrating.
All right, what's your review?
I am going to. You know what? No, I'm not gonna talk about that one because that one. I feel like I've had a trend where I've been talking about really like dark books in my review phase. So I think I'm going to save one of the darker ones for next time. So instead, I will review The Life Impossible by Matt Haig.
Okay.
This was a really... Matt Haig, I've read the Midnight... He wrote the Midnight Library also, which I enjoyed. He's got a few out now. I think he's becoming pretty popular. But The Life Impossible is about a 70-something-year-old lady from London... or England, I don't think she was from London, is left a house in Ibiza, in Spain, by an ex-colleague of hers. And she goes, and it involves magic, but it's kind of the premise of it is really like ecological preservation almost more than anything else.
Okay.
And it's kind of about how the ecology, the ecosystem around Ibiza is so pure and natural, and there's developers who want to come in and ruin it all, right? And it's like kind of that kind of a fight.
Okay.
But it brings in a mythical element in what they call it an alien. Actually, it's not magic. They call it an alien presence. But it was not what I was expecting, and it was kind of cool. It was a little bit, I don't know, of a reframe, I guess, on how we think about the world around us.
Okay.
And what impact we have on the world around us without realizing it. I don't know, I'm not normally into, like, the super nature things. That's not, like, where my heart is, the saving the planet stuff, which is super wrong of me, I know, but this kind of book helped bring that back into perspective. It's not dissimilar from which one? Demon Copperhead, probably, in that it just brings it back into perspective that, you don't know what other people are going through, sort of a thing. You don't know what the world around you is going through, and just to be kind to the world we live in.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It was a really good book. I gave it 4 stars.
Okay.
Yeah, I give it 4 stars. I don't do half stars in my book here, my reading book. I just do full stars. I think on Storygraph, though, I either gave it 4 or like 4.25. I forget because it lets you do it in quarters. But it was a good read. It was a quick read. It was a short book. Well, short for my standards. Maybe not for Tim's standards.
Yeah, what's a short book for you?
Hold on, I'll tell you. Yeah, it was short. It's only 24 pages.
Okay. Yeah.
It was shorter.
I would consider anything over like 400 pages to be long.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a short book.
So, we're going to end with comments from listeners about stuff that we should read. CD Ollyman 1158, who I know from the Bin Network, it's Ollie from the Unboxed Politics show, says, have either of you read the Belgrade by David Endings? It's a 5-book series, but there are several more books that are related. So I talked to Ollie about this when we were doing prep for our show, and apparently it's a 5-book series that's part of a 20-book series.
Jesus.
So no, Ollie, I have not read the book.
What's the genre?
It's fantasy.
Romantasy or pure fantasy?
No, pure fantasy. This is like Lord of the Rings fantasy stuff. Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to be my jam. I can give it a go. Lord of the Rings is not my thing, but Game of Thrones was. So.
And this is like, it was written in like the 70s and 80s.
It's going to be really Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's going to be really high fantasy.
It's probably more
stuff.
Your speed than mine.
I'll give it a shot.
For a 20-book series, we're going to be here for the next 10 years.
I know. And he laughed when he told me it was part of a 20-book series. So I will give it a shot, but probably not until next month. I don't want to put anything crazy on my lap before the end of the year. And then Billy Kershaw 2781 says, if we're reviewing Day of the Jackal.
Okay, so I rented this from the library.
Okay.
On my Kindle, and I started reading it, and I think it might be more my speed on an audiobook.
Okay.
So I'm intrigued by the concept, and I think it's going to have a good storyline. However, the names of everything are so super French, and I don't speak French, and so when I'm reading the book, I have a hard time keeping track of the places because they all are so foreign to me, and like remembering the names of the places and the people and whatever because they're all very French names.
Yeah.
So I think it would do better if I had someone reading it to me so that I could hear them saying the words instead of me reading them. Because what happened, I explained this to Tim when I was first starting to read this too, is that I'll read it and, you know, maybe I put emphasis on one part of the word the first time I read it. And the next time I read that same thing, it's a different emphasis and I think it's a different thing in my head.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to give it a go, I promise. But I've got to find it on Audible or, like, loan it from the audiobooks in the library, I think.
Right.
And then I will certainly review it.
Okay. Like we said, if you want to leave a book recommendation, leave it in the comments or email us at thebookrevolutionstore@gmail.com. And
or DM us slide into our DMs on Instagram.
Yeah. I don't want to use slide into our DMs, but
well, I mean that's what it is though. It's sliding into the DMs.
Or, you know, leave a comment on Audible or wherever. I don't know if you can comment on Audible, but I know you can do it on Spotify.
Wherever you're listening.
Let us know. Wherever you get podcasts from. And
tell us what you're reading.
Yeah. Leave us your reviews of books that you're reading. And we will read them.
Yeah.
To the audience.
Yeah. And if it's a book that we've also read at some point, we can comment on it. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, read what we've read.
Yeah, do it.
Do what we say.
If you want a selection from that, the ones that we've read and reviewed, well, you follow our story graph.
Yeah,
Go to our
follow
story
Story
graph,
Graph.
follow our story graph, see what we've read this year. If you've read any of it, let us know. We want to hear your take on it too. Because, we started this podcast late in the year, and we definitely read more books than what we've just talked about here, but we're trying to review on show what we've read recently, not historically. So there's a lot of books there that maybe you want to hear our take on it. Go through the story graph. If there's a book we've read that you want to hear what we thought of, let us know.
Yeah. And before we go, I just want to say, don't come at me for calling Bleach Romantasy.
No, I called it that.
Okay.
All the hate can be to me.
Yeah.
Everyone
go
love
at
on
Amanda.
Tim, hate on Amanda. That's fine.
I will say in Bleach, most of the sexual tension is sort of implied.
No, hold on. Is there magic?
There's magic.
Is there a romance train of a plot, subplot, whatever?
There's a lot of romance subplot.
Then it's a romantasy.
Okay.
That's by definition.
But there's
a romance. It's just a manga romantasy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not. There's no like sex scenes.
It doesn't have to have sex scenes.
All right. I'm just saying.
It doesn't have. That's a zero spice romantasy, but it's still a romantasy. When you go into the romance section, I said they're all smut. They're not all. Some of them are kind of boring. They've got zero spice at all. All the ones I read have spice, because why else am I there?
Yeah.
But
the part of it is there's a lot of subversion, I guess, of that.
Because if you got a shadow daddy, it's romantasy. Sorry. Hate to burst your bubble, but you've been into romantasy since before I've been into romantasy.
There's a lot of subversion.
I don't know, when did you start reading Bleach?
2006?
I think I beat you.
Oh, yeah?
I think Twilight came out before 2006, and I was reading that shit.
The main character...
But there wasn't a shadow daddy.
The main character in Bleach, he's very, like, innocent guy sexually. So, like, whenever someone is doing something sexual in his direction, he's very, like, oh my god, very embarrassed by it. But the other characters aren't. It's just the main character. He's, like, the good guy there ever was.
That's a trope.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. He's good for the sake of good.
No, I mean, in terms of romantasy, that's a trope.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the shy, inexperienced.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other
like romantasy.
And then the other characters who are more experienced, they're like, oh, Ichigo, you're so innocent.
Adorable.
Yeah, you're adorable.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing that happens.
Don't be embarrassed.
In most romantasies. There's normally at least a character who does that. Normally it's not the main character, but it's not completely impossible.
Okay. Well...
You like romantasy.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up, so...
Don't clear up shit. If you like Bleach, you like romantasy. You just like picture book romantasy.
Once again, send all your hate mail to Amanda at the Book Revolution store at gmail.com.
I'll write back.
And we'll see you guys. I don't know, we'll probably do one more episode before the new year, and then start it up again after New Year's.
I've got to get 6 books read between now and the new year, so I feel like we should record 6 shows so I could review every book I read between now and the new year's.
If you want to, we can just do a year-end, like, book review episode.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
All right, guys, next show, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, we'll do
We're going to do a year wrap, and we'll cover more books that we have read from before the podcast went live.
And if you want to post your reviews, and I'll go back and put this at the beginning of the episode, too, so people actually hear it. If you want to post your reviews in the comments on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, we'll read them on the air, and we'll have, like, a big, like, mailbag episode.
You know what we'll do, too? Follow our Instagram. We'll put up a few polls of, like, your favorite books of the year.
Yeah, I'll turn on the Instagram.
Oh, it's not on?
Well, it is. It's on, but we're not following anybody. Nobody's following us. So.
We're following people.
Us. We're following us.
No, we're following the bookstores.
Oh, yeah, we're following local bookstores, but that's it.
Yeah.
And we're the only ones that are, like, follow back.
Right, but that's because we've never told people on here to follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, so Instagram, it's TBR_CT, as that's our handle on Instagram. And
and start following us, and before the end of the year we'll launch some polls on what books have been popular in terms of sales, and you guys can all vote on them, and we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're books that I've read.
So we'll see you for episode 6 and the end of the year episode.
Woo woo.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
On the Book Revolution podcast.